Damascus, Syria, April 2007. For 18 months, a senior Iranian advisor had vanished from every camera, checkpoint, and wiretap. Western intelligence agencies called him a ghost. Satellite surveillance found nothing. Human sources went silent. But the breakthrough didn't come from drones or deep-cover operatives. It came from a barber chair. Inside a narrow shop serving Syrian generals and colonels, a single hydraulic seat was rebuilt under Project Scissors. Its mirror watching back, its headrest listening. One morning in late March, a client sat down under the name Hassan Rahim. Within 72 hours, a car bomb detonated 3 blocks away. No connection was ever established. This is the story of how Mossad tracked a ghost general using a Damascus barbershop. Reza Ahmadi was not famous, and that was the point. By the early 2000s, he had become a senior advisor to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, embedded with Syrian military units as a logistics and training coordinator. His official title meant nothing. His actual function was to serve as the operational bridge between Tehran's strategic planners and Damascus's armored divisions, coordinating equipment transfers, establishing secure communication protocols, and training Syrian officers in asymmetric warfare tactics developed during the Iran-Iraq War. What made Ahmadi valuable was not his rank, but his invisibility. He moved without escorts. He used rotating identities. He never appeared twice on the same route. A formative event in October 2005 hardened this approach into doctrine. During a routine convoy transfer near Homs, an Israeli airstrike destroyed 2 vehicles carrying Iranian military advisors. The target was a junior logistics officer traveling in the lead vehicle. Ahmadi was in the 3rd vehicle, scheduled to swap positions at the next checkpoint. The officer died instantly. Ahmadi survived because of a scheduling change made 30 minutes earlier. After that day, he began rebuilding his operational life around redundancy and denial. He learned to live small, blend into civilian patterns, and erase predictability. No fixed residences, no consistent transportation, no repeated social contacts outside secure facilities. By late 2005, signals intelligence went dark. Human sources dried up. Border crossings showed no pattern. By early 2006, Western analysts wrote a quiet assessment in a classified brief. Target presumed inactive or deceased. They were wrong. Ahmadi had simply become what intelligence services fear most: a high-value operative who had successfully disappeared into the operational background noise of a foreign capital. The challenge facing Mossad planners in mid-2006 was straightforward in theory, nearly impossible in execution. How do you locate a target who has mastered the art of vanishing when traditional collection methods, satellite surveillance, electronic intercepts, physical tracking, have all failed? The answer lay in reversing the operational logic. Instead of chasing the man, map the habits that power cannot abandon. Senior officers still need haircuts. Trust still pools in familiar rooms. Routine reasserts itself even in the most disciplined operational security. The doctrine guiding the hunt was classic denial and deception counterintelligence. When a target disappears from technical collection, reverse the vector. Find the irreducible necessities, the actions too ordinary to avoid, too routine to register as security risks. Mossad planners rejected penetrations of embassies and border crossings. Too visible, too predictable. Syrian internal security maintained aggressive counterintelligence around diplomatic facilities. Any surveillance operation near those locations would be detected within days. The obstacles were layered and specific. First, Ahmadi's aliases. Intelligence assessments suggested he rotated through at least 7 documented identities, possibly more. Each identity had supporting documentation deep enough to pass Syrian security checks. Second, Syria's internal security dragnet. The Mukhabarat maintained surveillance on foreign nationals, monitoring hotels, transportation hubs, and government facilities. Any sustained Western surveillance operation in central Damascus would trigger detection protocols. Third, the impossibility of traditional tracking. Without a fixed residence, regular travel pattern, or consistent communication signature, Ahmadi existed in the gaps between observable behavior. The trigger to execute came in August 2006, when a mid-level Syrian defector mentioned a single constant during a debriefing in Ankara, a barbershop on Al-Hamra Street, frequented by Syria's armored corps officers. The defector couldn't confirm Ahmadi used the shop. He could only confirm that senior Iranian advisors embedded with Syrian units were known to trust the establishment. The shop's owner had served Syrian military clients for 2 decades. Officers felt safe there. It was the kind of place where rank was respected and conversations stayed private. That single detail shifted the operational calculus. If you cannot track the target, embed collection inside the environment where the target must eventually appear. By September 2006, planning for Project Scissors entered active development. The concept was elegant in its simplicity. Transform a routine service into a surveillance platform. The asset wasn't the barber, it was the chair. But first, the human element required resolution. The barber, a 53-year-old Syrian national named Fuad Kassis, had no intelligence background, no ideological motivation, and no apparent vulnerability that could be exploited through traditional recruitment. What he had was debt. Significant debt. His son required medical treatment in Beirut for a chronic respiratory condition. The costs were mounting. Syrian state healthcare couldn't provide the specialist care needed. Kassis was 3 months behind on payments to private creditors who were growing impatient. Mossad's approach was constructed over 6 weeks of careful vetting. Financial records were mapped through banking contacts in Lebanon. Family connections were traced. Political affiliations were assessed. The assessment concluded Kassis represented an acceptable risk. Financially desperate but not politically radicalized. Loyal to his family but not to any ideology that would prevent cooperation. Most critically, his shop's client base made him valuable. Syrian colonels trusted him. That trust could be borrowed. The initial contact came through a Lebanese intermediary who presented himself as a private investor interested in helping small business owners upgrade their facilities. The cover story was simple. Kassis's cousin abroad, a fictional construction, wanted to subsidize shop renovations, new chairs, updated equipment, modest improvements that would enhance the business without raising suspicion. The intermediary asked only that Kassis accept the assistance and agree to minor operational requirements. Kassis asked what those requirements were. The intermediary explained. Periodic equipment maintenance visits, discreet cooperation, silence. During the third meeting in late October 2006, the true parameters became clear. Kassis would not be asked to gather intelligence himself. He would not be required to question clients or report conversations. He would simply operate his business as he always had. The new equipment being installed would serve dual purposes, one visible, one hidden. In exchange, his son's medical expenses would be covered in full. An exit plan would be established. If anything went wrong, his family would be relocated to Europe within 48 hours. Kassis asked one question. Would anyone be hurt inside his shop? The case officer, a Mossad operative working under Belgian diplomatic cover, answered honestly. Not inside the shop. That promise was kept. Cassis agreed. What he experienced in the months that followed was what intelligence handlers call moral compression, the psychological weight of living with a secret that could result in death if exposed. During a post-operation psychological assessment conducted 18 months later, after Cassis had been quietly resettled in Cyprus, he described the sensation as similar to walking on ice that might crack at any moment. Every client who sat in the modified chair, every conversation he overheard, every morning he unlocked the shop. He wondered if that day would be the day Syrian security arrived. But the mission continued. Engineers rebuilt a hydraulic barber chair with a hollow spine to house a pinhole lens behind the mirror frame and a bone conduction microphone embedded in the headrest. The system recorded to solid-state memory labeled Unit K12, swapped nightly by a courier posing as a supply vendor. Power drew from the shop's existing fluorescent ballast to avoid new wiring that would show up in electrical inspections. The lens captured a 70-degree field of view centered on the client's face. The microphone picked up conversations within a 2-meter radius. Image quality was sufficient for facial recognition analysis. Audio quality captured voice patterns for biometric matching. The team ran lean. One case officer managing strategy and external coordination. One technical handler responsible for equipment maintenance and data retrieval. One courier executing nightly collection runs. Codenames stayed analog to avoid digital intercepts. Scissors for the shop. Comb for the courier. Mirror for the modified chair itself. Communication between team members occurred through dead drops and brief personal meetings. No electronic communication. No phone calls. The operational footprint was kept minimal to reduce detection surface area. By November 2006, the system was operational. The window of opportunity was unknown. Ahmadi might visit the shop next week. He might never visit. The operation required patience, structured around uncertainty. Every day the chair captured faces. Every night the data was collected. Every morning, analysts reviewed stills and audio files, searching for patterns. First contact wasn't a meeting. It was patience structured around statistical probability. For 9 months, the chair captured faces. 1,200 sessions. 4,800 photographic stills. Audio files tagged by timestamp and cross-referenced against known voice patterns. The data stream was relentless and mostly useless. Syrian colonels discussing leave schedules. Mid-level officials complaining about supply chain delays. Conversations about family, weather, football matches. Analysts sifted through digital noise, searching for a signal that might never arrive. Complications emerged within the first 60 days. In January 2007, a routine security sweep by Syrian Internal Security detected unauthorized radio frequency emissions near Al-Hamra Street. The technical handler identified the problem immediately. The original camera system had included a low-power RF transmitter for real-time data transfer. The design was flawed. Syrian counterintelligence equipment was more sophisticated than initial assessments predicted. The RF signature was detectable at close range. The solution required switching to offline capture exclusively. No wireless transmission, all data stored locally on solid-state memory cards physically removed each night. The modification was completed during a planned weekend closure. The barber explained to curious clients that electrical work was being performed. No one questioned it. The RF emissions stopped. Syrian security moved on to other investigative priorities. A second complication arrived in February when Cassis's assistant, a 24-year-old apprentice barber named Tariq, began asking questions about the new equipment. Why did the mirror seem slightly thicker than before? Why did maintenance vendors visit so frequently? Tariq wasn't suspicious of intelligence operations. He was suspicious of theft. He worried Cassis was hiding money or valuables inside the chair. The concern was mundane but dangerous. The solution was operational rather than technical. Tariq's work schedule was quietly adjusted through Cassis. More morning shifts, fewer evening shifts. The nightly courier visits occurred after closing, when Tariq was no longer present. The questioning stopped. Tariq lost interest. The operation continued. By March 2007, the statistical window began shifting. Analysis of client patterns revealed something useful. Syrian officers with Iranian liaison responsibilities tended to visit the shop during mid-morning hours, between 0900 and 1100 hours. The pattern made operational sense. Early enough to avoid afternoon heat, late enough to have completed morning briefings. The time frame became a focus point for heightened analytical attention. On March 27, 2007 at 0914 hours, a man entered the shop without appointment and requested the back room. The back room was a smaller space Cassis used for clients who preferred privacy, usually senior officers who didn't want to wait in the main area with junior personnel. The man provided the name Hassan Rahim. He declined small talk. He requested a standard cut and shave. His demeanor was quiet, controlled, unremarkable. What separated this client from hundreds of others was a physical marker visible only in close-range photography. His left ear showed a healed shrapnel scar, a small crescent-shaped mark approximately 1.2 centimeters long, positioned just above the earlobe. That scar appeared in a 2004 Iranian military medical intake photograph obtained through a separate intelligence operation 3 years earlier. The photograph documented treatment Ahmadi received after a training accident at a Revolutionary Guard facility near Tehran. The chair captured 12 photographic stills during the 40-minute session. Facial geometry algorithms processed the images against known photographs of Ahmadi from 2003 through 2005. Confidence matching reached 87% based on bone structure analysis, ear morphology, and the distinctive scar. 87% was not certainty. It was sufficient to escalate. The clock started at 0919 hours when the first photograph was captured. The data card remained in the camera until the shop closed at 1800 hours. Standard protocol. No deviation from routine. The courier arrived at 1945 hours, retrieved Unit K-12, and departed on foot. The memory card reached the safe house at 2006 hours. By 2200 hours, analysts were reviewing imagery. The analytical process moved through 3 verification stages. First, automated facial recognition software compared bone structure measurements against Ahmadi's known photographs. The algorithm flagged the match as high probability. Second, human analysts reviewed the images manually, focusing on distinctive features: the ear scar, jaw-line asymmetry, a slight deviation in the nasal bridge consistent with an old break. Third, a dental specialist compared visible tooth alignment in the barber chair photographs against a 2004 medical intake image showing Ahmadi's dental structure. The alignment matched. By 0230 hours on March 28th, the analytical team reached consensus. Hassan Rahim was Reza Ahmadi with 87% confidence. The operational question shifted from identification to action. Where was he now? Where would he be tomorrow? The barber had not asked Hassan Rahim where he was staying. The man had volunteered no information beyond his name. No follow-up appointment was scheduled. The single data point, his presence in the shop on March 27th, was valuable but insufficient. What happened next was a calculated gamble built on pattern analysis and behavioral assessment. Intelligence officers reviewed everything known about Ahmadi's operational security practices from 2003 through 2005. One pattern emerged consistently. Ahmadi avoided repeating the same location twice in short succession. If he visited a restaurant on Monday, he wouldn't return until the following week. If he used a particular checkpoint, he would use a different route the next day. But there was an exception. Service appointments, haircuts, vehicle maintenance, medical consultations. These required return visits by nature. The hypothesis was straightforward. If Hassan Rahim was indeed Ahmadi, and if he had just received a haircut after months of avoiding barbershops, he likely wouldn't return for at least 6 weeks. That meant physical surveillance near the shop was unlikely to produce results. But it also meant something else. If Ahmadi had broken operational security to get a haircut, other patterns might be reasserting themselves. Routine has gravity. Once you break isolation to satisfy one normal need, others follow. The analytical team began constructing behavioral predictions based on a simple question. If you were Ahmadi, living under an alias in Damascus, and you just got a haircut for the first time in months, what else would you do? The answer came from traffic pattern analysis. Syrian internal security maintained vehicle checkpoint data across Damascus. Mossad had limited access to this data through a separate penetration of Syrian police administrative systems. Analysts ran a search for vehicles registered to Hassan Rahim or variants of that name. 3 possible matches emerged. One was eliminated immediately. A delivery truck registered to a bakery. The second was a diplomatic vehicle, clearly unrelated. The third was a civilian sedan, a 1998 Toyota Camry, registered to Hassan Rahim at an address in the Mezzeh district. Satellite imagery of that address showed a multi-unit residential building, unremarkable in every way. No special security, no unusual activity. The kind of place a mid-level professional might live. Analysts cross-referenced checkpoint passage data for that specific vehicle. Over the previous 6 months, it had passed through checkpoints in a pattern consistent with someone living in Mezzeh and commuting to central Damascus. But the pattern was irregular. Sometimes daily, sometimes gaps of a week or more, consistent with someone who traveled frequently or maintained irregular work hours. On March 28th, at 1440 hours, route prediction algorithms flagged a probability cluster. If the vehicle followed patterns observed over the previous 90 days, it would likely travel from central Damascus toward Mezzeh between 1500 and 1700 hours. The route would likely include Al-Jalaa Street, passing near a parking garage 3 blocks south of the barbershop. The vulnerability wasn't speed. It wasn't technical sophistication. It was routine reborn. After 18 months of perfect operational security, Ahmadi had allowed a pattern to re-emerge. He had a home address, even if temporary. He had a vehicle, even if registered under an alias. He had a predictable route, even if only probabilistic. That was enough. The execution team had prepared contingency plans for multiple scenarios. One scenario involved direct action if a high-confidence target presented a clear opportunity. The authorization for that scenario had been granted before the operation began, contingent on positive identification and acceptable risk parameters. The authorization came from the political level, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert's office, though no written order existed. The operational parameters were specific. No action inside the barbershop. No action that would compromise the surveillance platform. No action in areas with high civilian density. Acceptable collateral damage was defined as 0 to minimal. A vehicle-borne improvised explosive device provided the optimal method. It could be positioned in advance. It could be triggered remotely or via pressure sensor. It offered precision within a defined kill radius. The technical team had 3 devices pre-staged in Damascus, stored in separate safe houses, ready for deployment on short notice. Each device consisted of approximately 8 kilograms of military-grade plastic explosive configured for directional fragmentation. The design was intended to disable a vehicle and eliminate occupants without creating massive overpressure that would damage surrounding structures. On March 29th, at 0400 hours, a 2-person technical team moved 1 device from storage to the target location. The vehicle used was a commercial van marked with signage for a furniture delivery company. The device was concealed inside a municipal waste container positioned on Al-Jallah Street, approximately 40 meters from the entrance to the parking garage Ahmadi's vehicle was predicted to use. The waste container was a standard, municipal type, common throughout Damascus, emptied twice weekly by city sanitation crews. It would not attract attention. The trigger mechanism was a pressure sensor calibrated to specific axle weight and vehicle speed parameters. The sensor would activate only when a vehicle matching the target profile, weight, wheelbase, speed between 15 and 35 kilometers per hour, passed within 2 meters. The calibration was designed to avoid detonation by heavier trucks or lighter motorcycles. The margin for error was calculated at 12%. That meant an 88% probability the device would detonate for the correct vehicle, and a 12% probability it would either fail to detonate or detonate for an incorrect vehicle. By 0600 hours, the device was armed and the technical team had withdrawn. The operational assumption was that if Ahmadi followed predicted patterns, he would pass the location sometime between 1500 and the 1700 hours on March 29th. If he didn't appear, the device would be remotely disarmed after 1900 hours and recovered that night. The waiting began. At 0752 hours on March 29th, Hassan Rahim's Toyota Camry entered Al-Jallah Street traveling southwest at approximately 28 kilometers per hour. The vehicle's weight, wheelbase, and speed matched trigger parameters. The pressure sensor activated. The device detonated. The explosion occurred at 0752 hours and 18 seconds. The directional charge focused fragmentation toward the vehicle's passenger compartment. The blast destroyed the front half of the Camry instantly. The driver, Hassan Rahim, identified posthumously as Reza Ahmadi through dental records obtained during the subsequent Syrian investigation, died within seconds from catastrophic trauma. No passengers were present. The vehicle rolled approximately 6 meters before coming to rest against a parked truck. Immediate damage assessment showed minimal collateral impact. 2 nearby vehicles sustained fragmentation damage. No pedestrians were within the primary blast radius. 1 civilian approximately 20 meters away sustained minor injuries from glass fragments, treated at a local hospital and released the same day. By Damascus standards in 2007, the explosion registered as significant but not extraordinary. Car bombs were not common, but not unprecedented. The initial assumption by Syrian security was criminal activity or internal political violence. Within 6 minutes, Syrian police cordoned the blast area. Within 15 minutes, military security arrived. By 0830 hours, the barbershop on Al-Hamra Street reopened for business as usual. Fawad Cassis served his morning clients. No one connected the explosion 3 blocks away to the quiet shop where Syrian officers trusted their barber with their appearance and their conversations. The chair continued recording. Unit K-12 continued its nightly collection cycle. The operational platform remained intact. The body was transferred to a Syrian military morgue. Identification took 4 days. Hassan Rahim's documents were authentic enough to pass initial scrutiny. But deep records checks revealed inconsistencies. Syrian intelligence began investigating whether Hassan Rahim was an alias. They never determined for whom. Iranian authorities were notified that a foreign national possibly connected to Revolutionary Guard operations had been killed in Damascus. Dental records were requested through intelligence channels. On April 4th, Iranian officials confirmed the deceased was Reza Ahmadi. By 0800 hours on March 29th, local Syrian security understood an explosion had occurred on Al-Jallah Street. By noon, they understood a vehicle had been destroyed and one person was dead. By evening, they understood the victim was traveling under a possibly false identity. What they never understood was why. The investigation followed predictable patterns. Forensic teams analyzed blast residue. Military-grade explosives were identified. The device's sophistication suggested state-level involvement. But which state? And targeting whom? Syrian media attributed the attack to criminal networks within 48 hours. The explanation was convenient and vague enough to satisfy public curiosity without requiring diplomatic complications. Privately, Syrian military intelligence circulated a different assessment. The target was likely an Iranian operative. The method suggested Israeli operational signatures, but evidence was circumstantial. No arrests connected the barbershop to the blast. No surveillance footage captured the device's placement. The furniture delivery van used by the technical team had been stolen 2 weeks earlier, repainted, and abandoned in a different district after the operation. Every investigative lead ended in carefully constructed dead ends. Iranian authorities maintained public silence. Internally, Revolutionary Guard Command conducted damage assessment. Ahmadi's role was assessed as important but replaceable. His death created operational disruption but not strategic crisis. More concerning was the implication. If Mossad could locate and eliminate a senior advisor who had maintained 18 months of perfect operational security, what did that reveal about Iranian security protocols? The answer was uncomfortable. Routine is vulnerability. Trust is a weapon that cuts both ways. Within 3 months, Iranian advisors operating in Syria received updated security guidance. Avoid repeat visits to the same service providers. Minimize time in predictable locations. Assume all civilian spaces might be compromised. The paranoia was warranted but operationally exhausting. You cannot maintain perfect security indefinitely. Human beings require haircuts, medical care, social interaction. The alternative to accepting risk is accepting paralysis. For Fouad Kassis, the consequences arrived more slowly, but more permanently. In June 2007, 3 months after the explosion, Mossad case officers informed him the operation was concluding. The chair would be removed. His cooperation was no longer required. The exit plan was activated. Kassis, his wife, and his son were relocated to Cyprus under new identities. His son received the medical treatment he needed. Kassis opened a small barbershop in Limassol. He never discussed what happened in Damascus. He never returned to Syria. The cost to him was internal and permanent. He had allowed his shop to become a battlefield. He had enabled the death of a man who sat in his chair and trusted him with something as ordinary as a haircut. Whether that man deserved to die, whether the operation served justice or simply served power, these were questions Kassis couldn't answer. What he knew was simpler and harder. Every client who sat in his new shop in Cyprus, every conversation he had while cutting hair, carried the weight of what he had done. The weapon wasn't just the barber chair. It was the trust the chair represented. Tactically, the operation achieved its objective. a high-value Iranian operative was eliminated without airspace violations, without diplomatic incidents, without mass casualties. The intelligence gained from 9 months of surveillance, 1,200 client sessions, thousands of photographs, hundreds of hours of audio, provided strategic value beyond the immediate target. Patterns of Iranian-Syrian military cooperation were mapped. Officer networks were identified. Communication methods were analyzed. Strategically, the operation validated a shift in collection methodology that intelligence services had been exploring throughout the mid-2000s. Traditional surveillance, satellites, wiretaps, physical tracking, was becoming less effective against sophisticated targets who understood those systems and adapted accordingly. The future belonged to what internal Mossad documents began calling habit traps. Embed collection inside unavoidable routines. Transform the ordinary into the operational. Find the places where human nature reasserts itself despite training and discipline. The lesson spread quietly through intelligence communities over the following years. Not the specific details of Project Scissors, those remained classified, but the broader principle. The most powerful surveillance hides in plain sight. The most effective weapons look like services. Trust is the vulnerability that sophistication cannot eliminate. But the operation also raised questions that tactical success couldn't answer. When intelligence services weaponize everyday spaces, where does normal life end? If barbershops can become surveillance platforms, if routine services can become targeting mechanisms, what happens to the civilian spaces that exist between war and peace? The answer from intelligence professionals is straightforward. There is no between. There is only operational terrain that sometimes looks peaceful. The alternative view argues that this logic is corrosive. If everything ordinary can be weaponized, nothing ordinary remains safe. The barbershop wasn't a military facility. Fuad Kassis wasn't a combatant. The trust Syrian officers placed in their barber wasn't a security failure. It was an attempt to maintain normal human life inside a dangerous world. When intelligence services exploit that normalcy, they don't just eliminate targets. They eliminate the possibility that any space might remain neutral. The question cuts deeper than tactics. Was Reza Ahmadi a legitimate target? He wasn't a combatant in any conventional sense. He wasn't planning attacks. He was a logistics coordinator and training advisor. His death prevented no imminent violence. It removed a node in a network that Israel considered threatening to its long-term security. But networks rebuild. Nodes get replaced. The operational impact was temporary. The precedent was permanent. One perspective says this was precision warfare at its most refined. No drones striking from the sky, no airstrikes destroying buildings, no military raids endangering civilians. A single modified chair, a single vehicle, a single life ended with minimal collateral damage. The operation demonstrated that intelligence can operate with surgical specificity when properly resourced and patiently executed. This is the future of conflict. Targeted, precise, contained. The other perspective says this was something darker. It took a place of trust and turned it into a trap. It took a civilian providing a normal service and made him an accessory to killing. It demonstrated that intelligence services will exploit any vulnerability, cross any boundary, weaponize any trust if the target is valuable enough. This isn't precision. This is the systematic elimination of the distinction between battlefield and civilian life. Both perspectives contain truth. Both miss something essential. The operation succeeded because Ahmadi was human. He needed a haircut. He trusted a barber. He allowed himself one small piece of normal life after 18 months of perfect paranoia. That human need became the entry point for his death. The real question isn't whether the operation was justified. The real question is what kind of world we create when human needs become targeting opportunities. What's your perspective? Was Project Scissors an example of intelligence precision or an erosion of the boundaries that protect civilian life? If a barbershop can be weaponized in the name of security, what spaces should remain off limits even in shadow wars? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this operation made you reconsider where the line between security and violation actually falls, hit that like button and share this with someone who thinks about these questions. Because the answer you give reveals more about your worldview than it does about what happened on Al-Jala Street in Damascus on a March morning in 2007.